Hey St. Joseph's, it's Father John here. It's Monday, week 4 of our social distancing experiment, and of course, Monday of Holy Week as we enter into the holiest week of the year. What Sunday is to every week, so Holy Week is to the year. It's the very center and source of the year. And so, love you, praying for you, always offering masses for you, and join us for Liturgy of the Hours at 9 a.m. every day this week for morning prayer, and 5 p.m. for evening prayer. And of course, confessions are 12 to 1 Monday through Saturday, and the Cody Chapel is still open for private prayer from 9 to 5. Now the Gospel. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. 6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. They gave a dinner for him there, and Martha served while Lazarus was one among those reclining at table with him. Mary took a liter of costly perfumed oil made with genuine aromatic nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and dried them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Then Judas the Iscariot, one of his disciples, and the one who betrayed him, said, "Why was this oil not sold for 300 days' wages and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and he held the money bag and used to steal the contributions. So Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Let her keep this for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." The large crowd of the Jews found out that he was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. And the chief priests plotted to kill Lazarus too, because many of the Jews were turning away and believing in Jesus because of him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So just an FYI, during Holy Week, we have usually the first reading, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the first reading of Good Friday. So 4 readings are from the prophet Isaiah about the prophecy of the suffering servant. So if you're reading the first readings, pay attention that Jesus is the fulfillment of the suffering servant prophecies in Isaiah. Now, this is a beautiful reading passage for many reasons. And the two is what I want to focus on is the fact that Mary wastes all this money on Jesus. And then Judas is the one who sees it. Like, why? We could have sold that for 300 days' wages. This is how expensive this oil is. The oil that fills and the fragrances the entire room. And I think one of the lessons for this is that we should never be afraid of wasting our life on Jesus, on the church, on our relationship with God. That he is the highest and greatest good. He is the highest and greatest good. And that we should not be afraid to waste, especially this week, waste our leisure time on Jesus, waste the gifts of our personality on Jesus, waste the better years of our lives on Jesus. One of the comments I always get is when people ask me how long is seminary, and for me it was 7 years, and kind of the general reaction is like, wow, you could have been like a neurosurgeon or like a rocket scientist. You're like, yeah. But I wanted to be a priest. Because that's what God was calling me to, and I wanted to give God the best of who I was, and the best of what I was in my 20s was spent reading and writing and praying for 7 years at a seminary, and I wouldn't trade it for the world, because God is worth it. And we should never be afraid of wasting our life and wasting our talents and wasting our gifts on the Lord and for the Lord. And so today and this week, ask the Lord, what is he asking you to give of your time, to give of your gifts, to give of your personality, to waste it on the Lord? And second is the fact that Judas says, we could have given this to the poor. And then Jesus says this interesting line. He says, "Leave her alone. You always will have the poor with you, but you do not have me. You will not always have me." Jesus is the poorest of the poor. When he comes on earth, he doesn't have a place to rest his head. He's not he is an itinerant preacher, he has no home, that he is the poorest of the poor. And so that when we serve Christ, we are serving the poor. And then when we serve Christ, that makes us also want to go and serve truly the materially and spiritually poor neighbors around us, because in them we see Christ. We see the poorest of the poor, Christ himself. That's the reason that we serve the poor. Not because we want to be philanthropists, not because we're just merely altruistic, but because we want to go serve Jesus, who is the poorest of the poor, and he identifies himself with the poor, both the materially poor and the spiritually poor. And the spiritually poor are the ones that are the worst, that need our attention, because those are the ones that have eternal consequences on their soul. Material poverty obviously is bad, and we want to alleviate that with our poor brothers and sisters around us, but it is not as bad as spiritual poverty. And so the key is, in our relationships and in our interactions with the poor, we always have to remember that the poverty is not a problem to be solved, but persons to be loved. The poverty will always be until Jesus comes again, and we'll never solve it. But that doesn't mean we don't do something. We do something because these are people created in the image and likeness of God with utmost dignity, and we should treat them as people, as persons to be loved, not problems to be solved. So, St. Joseph's love you, praying for you. Enter into this Holy Week like you've never entered it before, and enter into the tomb with Jesus, that we are there with Christ, that the Eucharist has, if you will, has been taken away, that we are abstaining from the Eucharist, and allow this time to increase our hunger and our desire for the Lord, so that the day comes when we can receive him, that we will literally be salivating going up to communion like certain saints did in the history of the church. God bless you.